Hello and welcome to the Bradley Show. I'm Bradley, and in today's episode I'm going to be doing a bit of a video diary. So the idea is that over the next few weeks I'm going to be just doing regular video diaries, sort of introducing ideas around Exploding Appendix and the other projects that I'm kind of involved in. So I thought today I would do sort of a really basic one that sort of covers sort of everything. So I suppose I set up what has become Exploding Appendix in 2017. I'm slightly losing 10 years somehow. But that was really just a website at that point. And it's sort of grown into a sort of bigger project. It has become, on the one hand, a kind of meetup, I guess you could say. So we meet usually every 2 weeks, every fortnight. And we usually sort of explore some kind of idea relating to art, culture, radical counterculture, the avant-garde, but sometimes also sort of history, politics, sort of big ideas, philosophy and stuff. So generally I think it's sort of a way of exploring a whole range of ideas that sort of seem to me to tie together, but sometimes you might have to search for the ways in which they tie together. But yeah, it's a way of sort of bringing a lot of research together and sort of also creating an environment where I can meet people, chat with people who are artists, researchers, or people that are just generally interested, and share ideas. And then out of that, we sort of have been building a project called the Exploding Appendix Dossier. And the idea is the Exploding Appendix Dossier sort of brings together a lot of the research on the one hand, research into things like the avant-garde, and also brings together bits of artwork and other kind of projects that we might be involved in. The name Exploding Appendix kind of emerged because I think at the time my housemate at the time just happened to be chatting about her exploding appendix. But at the time I was just there sitting trying to work out a way of thinking about how to conceptualize what I was going to be doing. And the way that the word registered for me was to think about the back of a book, the appendix or appendices. And the idea of the appendices at the back of a book having these kind of different, fragmented, they're not always one singular topic, they kind of range and they might go off into different directions. And the way I saw that as a kind of metaphor, but also the way that exploding kind of being a metaphor for this kind of the back of the book sort of building to the point of breaking point where things exploded and just ever expanding. So that was the first thing that came to mind really with Exploding Appendix. And then as things have gone on, I've also sort of come to think about it as a kind of metaphor for the avant-garde. So the idea I had was that, on the one hand, art or even pondering, thinking about life often gets kind of considered as useless. So you could say art is useless or it's deemed useless. It doesn't seem to fulfill any kind of utilitarian function. But at certain points, it can also become kind of dangerous and subversive. And it's that sort of appendicitis, the parallel with the appendix becoming kind of inflamed and exploding, becoming dangerous and a threat to society. On the one hand, appendicitis being a condition where that which is useless becomes dangerous and a threat to your body, and the metaphor of art being a potentially useless activity that under certain conditions becomes kind of dangerous or a threat to society. So it was that conception of art that I was really interested in. And of course, I'm really interested in different ways of compiling text or thinking about text. Dossiers, encyclopedias, archives. I really like manifestos and I really like notes and fragments. And I like the way that, lists are deployed within manifestos. I also really like, all those kind of types of ways of writing. And encyclopedias, I suppose, really interested me. Partly because on the one hand you get this Enlightenment tradition, which goes back to Diderot, of sort of compiling this big edifice, which is like a really ambitious edifice, and it takes your whole life to compile and all that. And I've often thought about a sort of, I mean, it doesn't exist, but I thought of this project as itself a kind of encyclopedia, but I've also thought about this imaginary encyclopedia appendicitis, because I like the idea that this could build to a complete encyclopedia, and be as ambitious and over the top as something like Diderot's. But that's me going off into slight fantasy mode. But yeah, that's something that I'm always really fascinated by, is encyclopedias and sort of grand projects which kind of compile things. But I'm also like that sort of Enlightenment project compared to the sort of modernist project of the sort of fragments and the notes and the breakdown of that kind of grand ambition. So the modernist project to me is much more like an appendix. It's much more sort of fragmented. It's slightly less ordered and structured, or at least within certain factions of sort of modernism. So it sort of challenges some of the norms of the Enlightenment. So I was really interested in those two elements as a way of sort of exploring sort of history and the history of art. And I suppose generally I see Exploding Appendix as a kind of exploration of the avant-garde, but especially one that can range into different things. So it could go into the sort of origins of the avant-garde within the Enlightenment, right through to sort of like, Dada, Surrealism, Situationism, 1968, and so on, and stuff today. Yeah. So the idea is that it's sort of drawing upon this sort of rich history of artistic practice, thought, ideas, theory, history, politics, and trying to use them to sort of construct ways of collaborating, ways of imagining a kind of different future. And so those are some of the things that I've sort of, I suppose that's the more theoretical side, the stuff that I'm interested in. And then on the other side, I am working on some creative projects. I've just finished a feature film, or we started shooting it in 2018, but a lot of the fine-tuning has sort of been kind of happening, well, it's just happened, and we're pretty much planning to do some screenings and enter it into some festivals and eventually get it up online. So that's the Cake Tasting Society. It's a surreal fantasy about a sort of mysterious cake tasting society. There are 7 people drawn into it, and the criminal underworld out to thwart it. And then, especially during 2020, I started working on a project which is still in progress, which is called Disrupted Rhythms. Sort of tries to explore the way that rhythm kind of permeates everything. And so this project is drawing on Henri Lefebvre's notion of rhythm analysis. And so for Henri Lefebvre, the idea was that rhythm was something that could be studied. We could study rhythm in everything, in a sense. Everything has a kind of rhythm that could be sort of analysed, from the sort of heartbeat right through to sort of political systems and the way someone might walk down the street, activities in everyday lives and customs and norms, and a whole array of things. So that's what I found really interesting in Henri Lefebvre's work. So that's something that I've been, really trying to then explore, both in a kind of physical way through sort of getting people together, creating kind of happenings where different dancers come together and just explore. But I would usually create some kind of context, some costumes, or some kind of setting where we do that. And then on the other hand, writing about it. And compiling lots of different things. So at the end of the project, I kind of imagine it being both a photography project, maybe a photography book with an essays accompanying it. So I've been writing little essays to accompany it, and we've been compiling a film with a score. So hopefully it'll be a film and a CD, and also maybe an exhibition or something else like that. So I imagine this being a kind of broad multi media project. but that's, something that we've really been working on. Maybe I will say a few things about the avant-garde that I just didn't say a second ago. So the way I understand the term avant-garde is that it sort of, historically emerges out of the French Revolution. It's a kind of military term. The advanced guard, it's the front line of the army. And of course, it's the idea that the artist has a sort of prominent role within the front line of the army. So that's the first usages of the term, or the front line of new upheavals that would be happening. So, if you think back to the French Revolution, you've got David right at the front, creating art within the French Revolution. And so, the French Revolution sets a sort of precedent for this idea of the artist having a kind of prominent role. And then, there's throughout the 19th century and the 20th century, then you get these kind of upheavals, both in form, and you get sort of social and political upheavals. And I think, although they don't completely go together, I do think that there's times where those two things overlap, and that's one of the things that really interests me. So on the one hand, we come to think of the avant-garde as sometimes meaning weird art, or sometimes art that people might not expect to sort of see, or might not be might not be so conventional. And I think that comes from the sort of formal experimentations. But I think there are these tensions within the concept of the avant-garde between the sort of political definition of avant-gardism and aesthetic definition of avant-gardism. So that's something that I'm kind of personally interested in, and looking at how that sort of plays out through history and how that plays out today. So I'm really interested in finding new ways today to apply these ideas, or apply thoughts or insights from the past, adapt them and reinvent them, and ways of bringing different people together. So the idea is that I like the idea that I can work with lots of different people. I really like collaborating with people. I really like seeing art as a kind of social project. So I do a lot of work that's on my own, but I do feel like the social side really means a lot to me, and I think that's one of the things that I've really tried to sort of foster within Exploding Appendix, ways of sort of building different collaborations and working with people. So that's really just me giving a bit of a very, very, very brief introduction to Exploding Appendix. I probably have talked about loads of different things. So that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about for today. But the idea is that over the next few sessions or next few videos, I'm going to sort of try and go into some of these things in a little more detail. Hopefully get some friends and collaborators on to talk with me and do those kind of things. So yeah, that's really it. I'm going to say goodbye for now, but yes, I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Anxiety is caught between vitrines of past and present, future amber, viewing the present ghost, the aspirations of the architects and the tenants were not